Hey guys, I hope you can hear me okay. I think that the microphone is probably better. I'm just gonna wait for you guys to join to tell me. Sorry, I have like my red light set up just because I was like, I need my red light time. I don't want my blaring ring light destroying my circadian rhythm right now. I'm just not in the mood. So I apologize that the light's so bad, but self-care while we're working. Let me know how the microphone sounds. It's like, welcome to my ASMR video. Just kidding. So just to throw that disclaimer up there really quick, remember guys, nothing in this live is medical information. I'm not a doctor, nor do I want to be. Nothing is to diagnose or treat or prescribe or do anything of the like. It's more just for education and inspiration. And I hope you take this information and apply it to yourself. So that is the goal here. It's great to see you too, Gina. I'm so happy to see you. I had some pre-submitted questions already. So I'm just gonna go over those while you guys come up with your questions or ask your questions, and we'll get to it. So I had some questions left on one of my videos, and hey Leah, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I know this is like a perfect time to go live first time I have my red light on, but it's just one of those things where you gotta do what you gotta do. So I had some pre-submitted questions on one of my videos, and Judy Evans Hennigan had asked me a few questions, and I happened to catch her questions today, which is why I screenshotted them. They were left on one of my lives from the past. And she asked, why is magnesium bicarbonate better? And I will respond to that by just saying that it's not necessarily better, but it is a more bioavailable or absorbable form of magnesium. So if you're looking to really absorb the magnesium that you're intaking, bicarbonate is going to be by far the easiest just because it's the most natural. We would have gotten a lot of magnesium bicarbonate in the water that we drink, in the spring water and stuff like that. Now we have to kind of supplement it because we're not drinking natural sourced water. And our water is really deficient in bicarbonate and magnesium. But the one thing about bicarbonate that you do need to be careful of is it can dilute your stomach acid and it can mess with your digestion. So some people implement bicarbonate and then they get really stopped up, really constipated, and it's not working out for them. And in that case, I think magnesium glycinate is more appropriate. I think that magnesium bicarbonate and magnesium chloride, which is what you would put on your skin, like magnesium oil, are by far the best sources. They're the most natural sources. They're the sources we would actually find in nature. But magnesium bound to glycine or magnesium glycinate is probably my second favorite option because it is relaxing. Glycine is needed in high amounts by the liver. It's very restorative to the digestive tract, so glycine is important, even though it's considered a non-essential amino acid. So I think it's a good source if bicarbonate's not working for you well. So that's a long answer to magnesium bicarbonate is just the most bioavailable. It's the most easily absorbed by the body. And then her other question was, what are high quality carbs? I'm 69 years old, have progesterone cream and liquid also, suspended in vitamin E by Tim Braymeyer. However, all I think about is food, exclamation point. I take zinc, iodine, and vitamins B2 and B3, magnesium. I keep gaining weight. Help. So, when it comes to high quality carbohydrates, you really have to find what works best for you. Some people do really well on mostly fruits and can't do a lot of starches. That would be like grains and root vegetables. They just can't tolerate them. And so fruits are the way to go. Some people do well on a mixture of like fruits and sucrose. Sucrose is a mixture of glucose and fructose. So that would be like coconut sugar, cane sugar, maple syrup, and stuff like that. That's sucrose. So it's a glucose and fructose combined. And then we have pure glucose foods, which is going to be starches. That's going to be grain starches like sourdough bread, rice. That's also going to be potatoes and root vegetables like sweet potatoes. So you kind of have to find the mixture of what works for you. But if you're pounding the starches and you're gaining weight, you might do a lot better on fruits. And some people do better with a mixture. So like I personally know that I can do 1 serving of starch per day, and I usually do like potatoes, and I have to combine it with fructose. So I always do potatoes, but I have to drink orange juice at that meal. And I do mostly fruits for the rest of the day. If I'm overdoing on the starch, meaning I'm getting lazy or I'm, maybe looking for foods out of convenience, doing more sourdough than I should. Maybe I'm doing more starches than I should. Rice is easy, you know. I do tend to gain a little bit more weight. And I find that's pretty true with most women, especially women with PCOS or hypothyroid issues. Fruit is kind of a weight loss carb in the sense of it's light, it's easy to digest, and it requires no insulin to get into the cells. So fruit is the way to go if you're gaining a lot of weight on starch. And then her second part of that question was, I'm taking progesterone with vitamin E, which is good. I take zinc, iodine, vitamins B2 and B3, and magnesium. So my question would be, why are you taking zinc? How much iodine are you taking? Because if you take a lot of iodine and you're not ready for it, it shuts down your thyroid function. Zinc is not necessarily a good supplement to take unless you need to take it. It can deplete us of copper, which we mostly are already depleted in. So this is why I'm always encouraging brewer's yeast for B vitamins, grass-fed beef liver for copper, zinc, and B vitamins. I think that nature always provides us certain things in the proper package. And if we're focusing on supplements, we're not going to see as many results as if we're getting those nutrients from our food. So I don't know why you're gaining weight, Judy, but those are the things that I would want to bring up. Another question was, and sorry, I know I see your guys' questions coming in. I'll get to them in just a moment. I had a really good question because I want you guys to remember, if you haven't already read my post that I made a while back, that's labeled, it's pink and it says estrogen accumulation. And then the next post says progesterone power and has flowers all over it. It's like kind of orange and has flowers all over it. Those are two posts worth reading always, especially if you are ever told that you have low estrogen, because this question came in and this is very common. I've had so many women come to me who have estrogen dominant symptoms. They're like, for sure I have estrogen dominance. And yet when they get their estrogen tested, it's low. And they always say, Jessica, I have low estrogen. And I was like, do you though? Do you? So my recent HTMA test shows that I have a high zinc to copper ratio. This imbalance has been correlated with the low levels of estrogen relative to progesterone. What can cause this, as I have been assuming I have high estrogen and low progesterone as I have PCOS? Thanks for all your help. So remember, guys, that estrogen is going to be stored mostly in the tissues and the organs, and it requires both proper levels of progesterone and proper thyroid function in order to be able to move. Keep in mind that once it moves into the bloodstream, it's going to be moved to the liver to be metabolized and broken down and then put into the digestive tract to be carried out of the body via a bowel movement. And so if you do not have enough thyroid function or enough progesterone to mobilize estrogen from your tissues, you can have low estrogen on a blood test because it's not moving. It's not going anywhere. The bloodstream is just a highway for hormones. It's not where they're stored. And so this is so often the case with women, and they have to get their metabolic function up. They've got to get their stress down, and they've got to get the progesterone levels up to start to see that estrogen normalize. Because once you get those things in balance, estrogen starts to flood out of your tissues. I've seen so many women, I cannot tell you the amount of women I've seen who have low estrogen, and then 3 months later, after we work on their metabolism, we work on their progesterone levels, we work on just balancing their body as a whole, they retest their estrogen and it's high. It's flooding out of their body. And they're also getting symptoms like acne and cysts, and maybe their periods are a little heavier and more symptomatic. This is because now that estrogen that has accumulated over time is finally able to detoxify. The body has what it needs to break it down. So that's what my answer would be to that. And the zinc to copper ratio, I don't know what practitioner you're working with, but you're never supposed to read the HTMA as you see it. You're looking at the person as a whole, and you're saying, what could possibly be going on? If the zinc to copper ratio is off, like if the zinc is high compared to copper, I'm always looking at possible copper dysregulation, meaning we're vitamin A deficient, we're vitamin E deficient, we're possibly iron toxic, and so we're not able to use copper properly, and that's why our zinc levels are either being lost through the hair or our zinc and copper is imbalanced. And that goes hand in hand with estrogen accumulation. Because remember, estrogen, copper, and iron can all accumulate in the tissues and kind of actually work together to cause more estrogen dominant symptoms. And this can also have an effect on our thyroid, our metabolism, our weight, everything, our energy, all of it. Hi, Jess. Heartburn later in the day after lunch and dinner. A consistent feeling of something stuck in my throat. Feels like my throat is closing. How do I know if it's low stomach acid or high acid? Most of the time, heartburn is going to be caused by low stomach acid. But if you are eating acidic things or drinking acidic things and it's followed by that, like let's say orange juice, some people get orange juice heartburn. And I usually say just put a pinch of baking soda in there and see if that helps. Same thing with coffee. If coffee gives you heartburn, put a pinch of baking soda in there and see if that helps. It could be the acidity of those foods. But some people, and most people, especially if they've been on like a plant-based diet for a long time, or they've been under a lot of stress for a long time, most likely have low stomach acid. That's pretty common. So I can't tell you for sure if it's one or the other, but if we feel like something's stuck in our throat, that could be also some inflammation, and we want to check our thyroid. We want to actually see if we have like a goiter or our thyroid is bigger, because that can be a factor too. So that's something to kind of get checked out and just pay attention to. But most of the time, heartburn is being caused by low stomach acid, because what's happening is when you have a proper amount of stomach acid, there's a sphincter that's in between the stomach and the esophagus. And when you have low stomach acid, that sphincter can actually open up. Another thing that we can think of is when we're under stress, that sphincter, any type of sphincter requires like collagen and elastin. It requires, amino acids to stay strong. And so if we're under a lot of stress and our body's eating up our tissues, which is what happens when we're under stress, we need blood sugar. So what's going to happen is our body's going to increase cortisol, break down our tissues, and send them to the liver to be turned into sugar. This can include all tissues, including things like sphincters and organs and things like that. So that's another thing that I've seen, but it's hard to pinpoint. The biggest thing is if our heartburn gets better when we do things that increase stomach acid, like apple cider vinegar, bitters, hydrochloric acid with pepsin, the actual, or digestive enzymes, then we know it was from stomach acid being low. But if those things make it worse, then it's from acid being high. But either way, if we have that feeling, baking soda can really help. Hi, I wanted to ask if chicken is okay to eat for women with PCOS, as chickens these days are treated with hormones. It's not about, is it bad or good? Where are you getting your chicken? Are you getting it from a crappy source that's feeding it arsenic to make it fat? Foster Farms, or whatever, probably going to be problematic. But if we're eating a high quality animal that was raised with love and fed what it's supposed to eat, its native diet, that's a totally different story. I personally don't like chickens in abundance because they're so high in polyunsaturated fats. They have a really hard time detoxifying those from their tissues. And so I prefer ruminant animals like beef, bison, of course, grass-fed if we can we have access to it and we can afford it, and even like venison and stuff like that. Whitefish, shellfish, to me, those are such a better choices than chicken. That doesn't mean never eat chicken. It just means I don't think that chicken is like the best choice. Started eating fruit, drinking fruit juices and raw milk, and eating root vegetables, and I'm constipated. Any ideas as to why? Did you go too fast, too hard? That would be a question. Are you eating a ton of cheese? Cheese can be very drying and constipating. Also, are you doing enough protein? And you may need some fiber, like the raw carrot salad is important. Even doing some mushrooms, some bamboo shoots, like those can be helpful. And you may need some like cooked greens or something, like cook up some collards and some beef tallow. Some people do need a little bit of plant foods to keep digestion regular. But for people that can't tolerate them or that are finding that those foods are making them worse, they do better when they cut them out. But you kind of have to experiment and find what works for you. But also, I would ask, how much root vegetables are you eating? At the beginning of this live, I kind of talked about how starches can be problematic. And the reason why is because they feed bacteria which make endotoxins. And endotoxins can mess with things. But another thing we can think of, and a factor that a lot of women see, is they switch to a more pro-metabolic style of eating, which is what you're doing. You're eating foods that are now easily digested and assimilated. And what they start to see now is their issues start to come to light, because now they're mobilizing things. They're moving estrogen out of their body. They're making more progesterone. They're speeding up their thyroid function. And now they're actually seeing the estrogen move, and estrogen can be a pretty constipating hormone. It can also increase bacterial load, and it can make the liver and the gallbladder kind of sluggish, specifically by making bile kind of sluggish. So I would experiment with a few things. Look at how much fruit you're eating in comparison with starches. If you're eating too much starch, try more fruits. Make sure you're eating enough protein, and don't go too hard too fast. That would be like my biggest questions. And then also, raw carrot salad is always king, always king. Or maybe the throat muscle not closing. I read estrogen fluctuations may cause that. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, Michelle, I think, estrogen, remember, just like when, for example, I always say, like, we can look at estrogen in the context of pregnancy because it's very helpful. Estrogen's not a bad hormone. It just has a function. It has a purpose. And that's why it's secreted in high amounts during our pregnancy, because it performs a certain purpose. It brings water into the cells and helps the cells proliferate, which means like breast tissue. Obviously, we're replicating tons and tons of tissues when we're pregnant, but there's also a lot of changes and shifts happening, right? Our hips are widening, our birth canal is having to change, and our vaginal tissues are becoming stretchier. But that affects actually all our tissues. This is why, like, when you're pregnant, you're not supposed to stretch or do the splits or things like that, because you can actually cause like irreversible damage to your tendons and ligaments, because they are really, really stretchy during that time, especially the third trimester. And that's when estrogen's kind of high. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Estrogen can definitely affect the tissues. It's kind of tissue destructive in that way. Obviously, in context, that has a purpose, right? To make sure the baby can fit through, but we don't want that happening just all the time. So yeah, estrogen can definitely mess with, especially estrogen fluctuations can mess with all types of things, all types of tissues. I normally don't sweat, but have noticed I'm sweating a lot after a meal. Also, I'm very sweaty when I work out. I personally have experienced this, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong or normal. If you're worried about it, it's something you would, of course, want to focus on. But sweating is kind of a sign of health. If we're too sweaty, there could be a problem. And if we're not sweating, there could be a problem. So, sweat is a way for the body to get junk out through the skin. Our skin is one of our major detox organs, including the lungs, the liver, and the kidneys. And so, if we have a bunch of junk coming out of our skin, especially if we have really bad body odor, that can be a sign the body's speeding up detoxification. But if we're sweating too much when we're working out, we might not be tolerating workouts very well, because we don't want to be losing that much minerals through our skin. But, sweating can be a sign of stress, almost like, when we get a hot flash or the night sweats or something like that. It can be a sign of cortisol or adrenaline or estrogen even. It's very much, it can be a stress response. So we want to keep an eye on what factors are maybe driving those things. But I would say if you're sweating more after certain meals, that could be a sign that meal's maybe stressing you out. Or if you're sweating after a workout, then that could be a sign that your workout's stressing you out. But what I would do is I would corroborate that with my temps and pulses. So I would be taking temps and pulses maybe a little bit more frequently. I would be paying attention to how my temps and pulses relate to my sweating issues. That's what I would do if I was in that situation. If you go through a stressful period of time, like less sleep, etc., does it impact your cycle immediately or 3 months from now when the follicle matures? I think it can be both. I've seen both things. So I saw, like, when all the shit hit the fan a couple of weeks or months ago, so many of my clients didn't ovulate. Like they were all very on a similar cycle, and they just missed ovulation, which meant their periods came late. So that's something that I did notice. And that's pretty common. Traveling, for example, while you ovulate can mean that you're ovulating later, or you don't ovulate that cycle, and so you miss a period, or your period comes late. So stress can affect your cycle immediately, but stressors over time can definitely affect the amount of progesterone we make, 3 months from now. So our follicle is obviously, like you said, maturing over the course of 100 days. And what happens now can affect me 3 months from now. And I see this a lot with things like hair loss or like anxiety or things like that. It's almost like the stress hasn't quite caught up with them until that 90 to 100 day mark. But like 3 to 6 months later, they're really paying for their stress that they experienced, 3 to 6 months ago. So I think it can be both, honestly. And this is why I'm always just talking about reducing stressors as a whole and just implementing action steps into our life that help us, to the best of our ability, respond to stressors. And of course, life happens, and there are certain times when that's just not possible, or we have to go through seasons of life where it's just going to be stressful, and we have to do the best we can. But it's definitely possible for it to affect both. Zainab is asking, Zainab's usually here. She's the early bird here, always first. Would you recommend oregano essential oil for SIBO or candida? I personally like Wild Oregano by Dr. Cass Ingram. His company is called North American Urban Spice Co. And his whole line is really incredible for infections like that. oregano, or the wild oregano P73 super strength, is one of my favorites, but a lot of them work very, very well. So I personally like oregano, because any regular oregano that's grown, the conventional way, which is a lot of times they're genetically modifying them, or they're growing them in soil that's not correct. Whereas wild oregano grows out of rocky hills in, Italy. And so this is a very different type of food. And so it has a very different function. I personally don't think any oregano oil is safe to take long-term, but oregano, in my opinion, is safe just because of how it's grown. So I like oregano, and it's one of the many supplements that I like for issues like bacterial overgrowth when paired with like a raw carrot salad, and like well-cooked mushrooms. Horseradish can also be an incredible like bacteria reducer. I like, oh my gosh, I'm spacing right now. I'll think of it in a second. There's a horseradish powder that works really, really well. I quit caffeine for 4 months, and I've introduced it for the first time this week by drinking matcha green tea, and I've noticed bloating. I'm eating it with a full nourishing meal. Thoughts? I personally think that matcha can be problematic for a lot of people. It does have different things. So, especially matcha, it's ground up tea leaves. It has polyphenols in it, which can feed certain bacteria. So that can be a problem for people. Green tea is also naturally high in fluoride, and so that can be a problem. Like, it slows down people's thyroid, and so it messes with their digestion. And then also the quality of the matcha matters. So if it's not organic and it's not properly grown, if that's a pesticide-rich food, we're just intaking a bunch of glyphosate. So those are just factors. I'm not saying that that's a factor for you, but those are things that I think of when somebody's reacting to matcha. I personally choose coffee over matcha any day, just because I do think matcha can be problematic for a lot of people. Also, when is the best time of the month to drink raspberry leaf tea if I'm trying to conceive? I think it's nourishing all month long, but I guess maybe particularly in the second half of the cycle, I can see it being extra nourishing. But yeah, I think it's great for all times. It's very rich in certain nutrients, especially like B vitamins. I had a uterine ablation done last year, so I don't really have a period, just a bit of spotting once a month. I'm 40 years old. Do you know if this would affect hormones? Yeah, of course. If we don't bleed once a month, our period is a way for us to shed excess iron, to increase iron recycling, and to help detoxify. This is why women live longer than men in most cases. So, it's just one of the many reasons, I should say, but it is definitely a factor. And so if we're not bleeding every month, and I see this even with women who are maybe missing their cycle, they're younger. I know you said you're 40, but I've seen this in women who are in their 20s and 30s as well. Maybe they're not having a period for stress reasons or something like that, under eating, over exercising, and they tend to have iron toxicity issues because they're not bleeding. And so this is going to lead to thyroid slowing down, metabolism slowing down. And so of course, when we're not having a period, we want to make sure, the number one thing we want to make sure is if we're ovulating or not. And if we don't know how to track our cycle, I highly recommend the book Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler. Every single woman needs to read that book. I wish it was required in school, but probably won't ever be. But every woman should read that, no matter their age, because understanding your cycle and knowing if you're ovulating or not is very empowering for fixing our health. And we need to be making progesterone, and we need to be making enough progesterone, meaning our luteal phase is lasting 11 to 14 days, to really have a high-functioning life. And so that would be my number one worry if I wasn't getting a regular period or a bleed, is the iron issues and the progesterone. An easy way, like if we're not bleeding, we're not having a period, or maybe we're post-menopause or we're menopausal, a great way to increase iron recycling and to get rid of extra iron is to give blood, to donate blood. It's an easy, inexpensive way to increase our health. And I personally do it like about once a season, so every 3 months. If I didn't have a period, I would probably be doing a little more often personally. Hey Jess, FM student here. Hey Yvonne, I explained to my dad about it, but he's confused as to why we need to consume milk from another animal as well as meats. Figured you could answer this better than I could. I don't think you need to consume milk from another animal or meats, but what's the alternative? So that's always my question for someone. It's not about why these things, it's about the nutrients in these foods. These are foods that we've traditionally eaten for thousands of years. And just recently, it's become possible for people to cut these out of their diet. Before, it wasn't possible. You would die if you didn't eat animal foods because those were often mostly the only foods available. And so, we have to kind of look at that perspective. I know in the modern times, it's like, oh, why would I eat those foods? Like, why would I need them? Because you can, eat a box of cereal or whatever. But that's not a traditional food that your body comprehends, and it's not providing you the same nutrients. And so we have to think of it that way. Not all food is created equal, and animal foods provide us specific things like retinol. So animal vitamin A is preformed vitamin A. And retinol is so important for all of our tissues, for hormones, for longevity, for liver health, for eye health, for skin health, for hair health, for heart health. Like, I could go on and on and on, but fat-soluble vitamins in particular are very important. And it's very difficult to get enough fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K, and even vitamin E from plant foods. So for me, that's enough of a reason. I know that our needs for these fat-soluble vitamins are so incredibly vast that I would never cut out animal foods ever again. I would never cut out high-quality grass-fed beef. Maybe I'd cut out chicken or something like that. But grass-fed beef, and I would never cut out high-quality dairy ever again because I know that these foods are so important. And if people are, if you're trying to argue a point, it can be very difficult, especially if someone has a different belief system. But you could always just counter with the question, then why is dairy or milk the first thing nature feeds a newborn baby? And that goes for humans, that goes for cows, that goes for goats, that goes for sheep, that goes for kangaroos, that goes for camels, that goes, we can go on and on and on. Bison, donkeys, we can go on and on and on. Why is nature feeding milk first on a very blank, clean slate in a baby that's very susceptible to its environment? Why is milk the first thing going into its trap? That would be my question for somebody. I do think it's possible to be vegetarian and be healthy as long as we're eating organ meats, fish, and dairy and eggs. But I don't think we need to be eating muscle meats. But I do think it can be a great source of protein, and it's hard to get enough protein if we're not. Hi, what are your thoughts on endometriosis? Endometriosis, in my opinion, has a lot to do with estrogen. There's a lot of research studies. There's a lot of research pointing to the fact that people with endometriosis have a hard time breaking down estrogen properly. And so that is a factor. And then I also think bacteria and digestion is a factor. So we know that the uterus has its own microbiome, which means its own balance of bacteria, pathogens, fungi, things like that. And so, if we know that, we know the endometrial tissue can be affected by bacteria just as much as our gut tissue can, or our skin, or our oral microbiome. And so I do think it has a lot to do with that. There's also a lot of research pointing to the fact that PCBs, women with endometriosis, are particularly sensitive to PCBs. These are environmental toxins or environmental xenoestrogens. Environmental xenoestrogens are what you're going to find in like your hygiene products, things like lotion, self-tanner, makeup, shampoo, conditioner, deodorant, all that junk. If you don't know what ingredients are going on your skin or is in your air and you're breathing, stop now. Make sure that what we're putting on and in our bodies is the most natural as possible, and we're not being exposed to these environmental estrogens. And this includes pesticides. So women with endometriosis are very sensitive to pesticides. So eating organic as much as possible, amazing. And then, like I said, avoiding xenoestrogens in our environment, very important. So, the steps, and that might seem overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, my gut, I need to focus on estrogen. Well, the first is always remove the stressors. So, we don't want to work on fixing the stressors until we've removed the incoming stressors. And I would say the most important priority for a woman with endometriosis is to clean up her water, stop drinking out of plastic water bottles, clean up her air, and clean up her hygiene products, what's going on her skin, and is in her environment. Once that's cleaned up, then starting to focus on foods, like making sure we're eating organic, making sure we're balancing our blood sugar, getting enough protein, getting enough carb. All the things I talk about at Jessica Ash Wellness applies to women with endometriosis. They just have to understand that they're more sensitive to all the things I'm talking about. And it's very imperative, and it's a priority to start cleaning up the diet and lifestyle. And then things like orange juice, which is why I promote it so much, the raw carrot salad, well-cooked mushrooms, vitamin E, magnesium, all those things are going to really help us break down estrogen a lot more effectively. So that's really helpful. And then really hyper-focusing on our progesterone levels. Because remember, the only thing powerful enough to block estrogen and break it down, progesterone. So progesterone, many women with endometriosis are deficient in progesterone. They're either not ovulating or they're not making enough progesterone when they ovulate. And this is partially because of the stressors that are coming into their environment. So that can help. But I know that there are a lot of doctors and practitioners that use bioidentical progesterone, particularly with women with endometriosis, because it is helpful. Thoughts on root cause of endometriosis, severe pains, any strategies we can try to help with pain or heal from it? Like I kind of just answered this, but I would also bring up trigger point therapy, because that scar tissue and calcification does play a role. And so check out Mitigate Stress. They are kind of like the experts in trigger point therapy, I would say. And I really like their approach when it comes to posture, breathing, but most of all, breaking down calcified tissues physically. So using trigger point therapy and myofascial release to break up those physical composites of calcification, so we can break that stuff up and actually see healing and hydration of that tissue. Because think about, like, in our reproductive area, let's say we have all this fascia, which is like that web-like tissue that connects our tissues and our muscles, and it's kind of bound up in this ball. And we've got toxins in there, we've got calcium deposits in there, and just kind of like suffocating our muscle in that area. When we take a ball or a lacrosse ball to that, or some type of trigger, and we start to break up that stuff, all that calcification gets released. All that junk that was stored in this ball gets released, and now the body can deal with it. And there's no longer kind of a concentrated source of issues. And then we can also think of, now that that muscle or that fascia has been released, now the muscle tissue can hydrate with blood and oxygen and nutrients, which I think in a lot of reproductive conditions is part of the problem. We're having a hard time getting those nutrients and blood flow to the areas that we need it. So that was just a little tangent. Hi, just got my first recovery period after having HA for 3 years. Woohoo! Leading up to my period, I've had the worst acne I've had in my life. I'm 23. How can I best manage this? Well, remember, when we start to ovulate again, which is why we're getting our period, we ovulate, right? We drop an egg, we make progesterone, and then we have a period 11 to 14 days later. That means we're now starting to have progesterone in the system. And remember how I said earlier, progesterone and thyroid function is very important for mobilizing estrogen? So that's a lot of times what's happening when our period restarts. Another thing is the iron. Like I mentioned, iron is something that accumulates, especially if we haven't had a period for 3 years. We haven't shed any excess iron, and we haven't needed to encourage the iron recycling system. We haven't had we haven't detoxified from that stored or bound up iron in a long time. And so that can be another factor. I do think acne has a big iron component. So vitamin E can help with stuff like that, but sometimes it just takes time, especially if it's just your first period. My derm wants to put me on antibiotics, but I'm hesitant due to my history of IBS. I don't blame you. Some people do really well on like something like tetracycline or antibiotics like that. And then some people, it makes their issues worse. So I don't blame you for being hesitant. I think it's kind of a toss-up for most people. And I don't think there's a right or wrong. One more question. Have been eating FN-approved breakfast that is very nourishing. Coffee after with gelatin, coconut oil, raw milk, and raw honey. Recently started to have caffeine intolerance symptoms, which I never have had since starting FN 5 to 6 weeks ago. Unsure why it's starting out of nowhere. Because your metabolism is speeding up. So if that breakfast was working for you for 6 weeks, that's amazing. But what if you now need more fuel in the morning because your metabolism is now sped up? That's just an opinion. That's just me kind of bringing something up. Like, have you noticed improvements? Have you noticed things shifting and changing? Because if that's the case, then, remember, what once worked for us may not anymore, because as our metabolism gets faster and faster and faster, and we're getting it back to where we want it, back to balance, our needs for fuel will increase. So I noticed that when I first started healing my metabolism, I could get away with eating every couple of hours. I didn't really eat a lot. Now I cannot get away with under eating, or I feel awful. I feel like absolute shit, because it's like I now my metabolism is so sped up. I have more muscle tissue as well. I have the responsibility of fueling that metabolism properly. And I cannot drink coffee if I didn't have enough breakfast. And I used to be able to tolerate it with just like a normal sized breakfast. And now I need a pretty large breakfast that includes both potatoes and orange juice. I really need to fill my liver up with sugar before I drink caffeine. So that's just me personally, but that's something I have seen with clients as well. As things start to begin to balance out and we begin to see the metabolism speed up, we might need to make changes to our diet or shifts. So if DIM is not the answer for estrogen detoxification, what is? Dutch tests showed high E2, despite good progesterone, low androgens, DIM was recommended to lower the high estrogen. That's kind of, to me, like a very traditional approach, like diagnose, estrogen dominance, prescribe, DIM. You know what I mean? It's like, why we're not asking the right questions. Why is estrogen high in the first place? Well, stress. Estrogen's a stress hormone. And so we need to look at all the factors required for estrogen detoxification. Like I've said, you always want to look at progesterone in context with estrogen. So first of all, how is your progesterone breaking down? You want to look at those A metabolites and B metabolites. You want to make sure you have enough progesterone in relationship to estrogen, because you could have progesterone levels that are above normal, but they're not optimal for the amount of estrogen we have. So that's a problem. And then we also need to acknowledge that the liver needs to be full of sugar, of glucose, to break down estrogen. We also need B vitamins, we need vitamin E, we need vitamin C in high amounts, and we need our minerals balance. We need sodium, potassium, magnesium. Our liver needs nutrients. And then phase 2 requires protein. And many women who have estrogen issues, especially phase 2 estrogen issues, who are being told they need to take DIM, actually need to eat more protein. This is what angers me, is like nobody's actually combing through what they need and is just saying like, take DIM, and it's causing their hair to fall out and make them crazy because it's pushing estrogen in a different direction, which is not necessarily what we want, especially if we can't handle it anyways. So some things that are really great for estrogen, in my opinion, are vitamin C rich foods. Orange juice is very rich in something called naringin and naringenin, which is directly anti-estrogen. It's an aromatase inhibitor. So drinking a fresh glass of orange juice every day is so powerful. And, you know, for example, that's going to require 3 large oranges, so 21 oranges a week. That's way cheaper than a DIM supplement. You know what I mean? It's way more effective. So that's one of my first favorite thing for estrogen, is a fresh glass of orange juice every day. Go buy a bunch of oranges at Costco, go buy a bunch of oranges at your farmer's market, and do that over take a supplement. Second thing is raw carrot salad every day. You can find that on my Instagram feed. The raw carrot salad, non-negotiable, because the raw carrot salad, what it does is it binds to estrogen and it reduces endotoxins. The third thing is vitamin E. Vitamin E, I like Mitolife's PUFA Protect is great. I like Swanson's sunflower vitamin E, great. I like AC Grace's Unique E, great. All of those brands are great. If you want to do Mitolife's, I really like it because it's a higher dose. I do have a coupon code, it's JAW15. But vitamin E is very, very powerfully anti-estrogen. And then we also don't want to overlook vitamin C. So vitamin C is imperative, and it's very difficult to get enough in a day. Like, you know, I would say download Chronometer and just track your food for 3 days and look at the amount of micronutrients you're eating. You're probably not getting enough vitamin C. And so that's another just factor that we need to consider. And then minerals, like we can't overlook magnesium. We can't overlook high quality sea salt. We can't overlook potassium. Like potassium's quite the job to get in every day. And that's going to support our thyroid function. Because remember, if we're low in potassium or we're not getting enough, our cells are not sensitive to thyroid hormone. And we could have the most normal thyroid function in the world on a lab, but we're not responding to it in the cell because our potassium is low. So coconut water, like potatoes, things like that, very helpful. It's very difficult to get enough potassium. So that's just a few of many things that are helpful. You know, stinging nettle or nettle root teas are also very anti-estrogen, powerfully anti-estrogenic. So there's a lot of options. And DIM, I don't think is the best option. Would drinking some A2 with maple syrup as your first meal of the day be too little, or would that work for some? It might work for some, especially if you're someone that doesn't like to eat first thing in the morning. I would say count that as a morning snack. It's not a breakfast. I would say, you know, maybe if you're going to eat like an hour later and that's something you want to get first thing in, it may work for some, but I would never do that pre-coffee. That's not enough for a pre-coffee unless you have very balanced hormones and you're just kind of in a maintenance phase. Hi, Jess. Any idea when your site will be up and working again? I think I finally hit a roadblock and need help. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm working on the website all by myself, which is like a horrible mistake. I should have just paid someone to do it. It's almost done. I just was waiting on the pictures. The pictures came in today, so now I just have to put the pictures in. And then I'm working on the faves page, which you guys have requested, just like all my favorite products in one place. So hang tight. It's probably going to be up on, like, I'll be able to work on it on Friday night and Saturday. So sometime next week, Monday. And I have blog posts that I wrote for you guys. Like, I'm getting my crap together. I have been working. That's why I've been so silent on Instagram. I have really been working very hard to change things up. Hey, Jess, getting my IUD out this week. Oh, that's exciting that you made that decision. It's probably like been a long time coming for you. Any suggestions what I can do to help my hormones normalize and my period return? Thanks. You know what? I just listened to an amazing podcast interview with Lauren De La Cruz. She's so great at talking about post-birth control. And she did an interview on Mito Life Radio, which is Matt Blackburn's podcast. And I just really liked her way that she just explained post-birth control. Like, she did such a good job. So I would say listen to that podcast episode. I think it's Mito Life's most recent podcast episode. And I just really like her. Her handle is Innate Functional Nutrition. She knows her stuff. She talks about very similar things to what I do. We're very aligned in our beliefs, and as it seems for the most part. And I just really like her. So I just recently listened to her interview. So that's like the first thing off the top of my head. But she has so many great tips in there. She talks about like vitamin E, the importance of vitamin E and vitamin A and animal foods and retinol and just a lot of tips post-birth control. But really it's about, because birth control can be kind of androgenic and estrogenic, and it sometimes can cut off our ovulation, even an intrauterine device. Not always, but sometimes. It's really about focusing on making sure we're making enough progesterone, tracking our ovulation, and just restoring the nutrients that were lost possibly when we're on those synthetic hormones. I'm taking a prenatal with 9 milligrams of iron. So I think it's lower than most. Is it safe to also start taking desiccated beef liver, or should I stop the prenatal? I can't tell you what to do, but remember, like, iron can be pretty toxic, and even Dr. Ray Peat talks about how most babies are born with jaundice from iron poisoning from the prenatals, and so I personally would never take a prenatal with iron in it. I would personally do like grass-fed beef liver and stuff like that, but of course check with your doctor and yada, yada, yada. Just because I would do something doesn't mean you should. But, iron can be very toxic, and it can deplete us of a very important nutrient, vitamin E, which is protective against estrogen. And that is very important when we're trying to protect our baby. So those are just some factors I would look into. But I personally wouldn't do both, grass-fed beef liver and a prenatal that had a high amount of iron. Remember, guys, for a non-pregnant woman, our needs for iron is 2 milligrams. 2. And many of us grew up eating like 400% of that amount when we were eating all of our nasty cereals. So most of us are pretty iron toxic. Are oxalates an issue if one drinks about 4 cups of coffee a day? Is calcium important to intake for this? Oxalates are one of those things where people just don't understand them. I think that oxalates are just like any, plant material. They're there for a reason. And so I think a lot of the problem with oxalates is because people are just overeating so many different plant foods that we wouldn't overeat. We used them more like a condiment in the past, and now we're treating them like a main course, which is just kind of weird. So oxalates, in my opinion, I'm not worried about coffee as long as I'm not drinking it black. That's not the first thing that comes to my mind is like oxalates. I would just want to make sure I'm eating enough fuel to, remember, coffee increases our metabolism. And so we want to make sure we're eating enough fuel to sustain that high metabolism. But I personally, I'm not worried about oxalates when I drink coffee unless it's been a past problem for me. And I wouldn't just take calcium. That's not my favorite supplement. It's probably my least favorite. We want to always get calcium from our food if we can. Thank you, Jess. Always love your lives. Great info. I'm so glad, Viola. Thank you for taking time out of your day to do this weekly. All that you do and teach is very appreciated. Oh, I appreciate you guys. I know I haven't been on. I mean, the world has just been crazy. I've wanted to kind of just take a step back to allow other voices to be, before me, and sometimes it doesn't seem like this is important, but I've also been really working on the back end of Just Cash Wellness so that I can really start pumping out content for you guys. There's been a lot of like stuff that has just gone by the wayside that I've just like, I gotta get this done so I can really start to pump out like blog posts and YouTube videos and stuff like that. Hi, Jessica. I just joined your FN program. Oh, welcome, Maria. Even though I've been working on this for years, I'm happy your outline is very clear and organized, learning lots. Thank you. So glad. So I have my monthly now. Yay. Congratulations. Taking the ginger tea you recommend. For some reason, I'm so constipated, not sure what else to do. Yeah, I mean, so in the Fully Nourished Supplements Guide, there is a recipe for stewed prunes. Another thing we can consider is doing the magnesium chloride on our abdomen, the magnesium spray. That can really help. When we shift our diet, sometimes constipation can occur, and we really want to make sure we're giving our abdomen a nice good rub in the direction that our colon would move. But magnesium can be helpful. Stewed prunes can be helpful. And aloe vera can also be very helpful. And then we always want to make sure, especially if you're an FN student, that you're doing the raw carrot salad every single day. And remember, guys, Fully Nourished is getting completely renovated. The new one's gonna be out on July 22nd. So the content's just going to be like updated and made so much easier to, move around the course and get access to all this information. I'm going to add a lot of information because I've been taking in your questions. A lot of people have been constipated. A lot of people have gained some weight and they're wanting to figure out how to lose that weight. And so those are things I'm taking into account and adding to the new curriculum. I've been doing FN for about 2 months now and noticing that I'm getting hungry 1 to 2 hours after meals. I feel like I'm eating enough carbs and protein at each meal, but it seems like I'm starving. Also, I'm waking up in the middle of the night starving. I keep honey next to my bed and helps me go back to sleep, but when will this stop? I would kind of factor in your fat intake. You might need a little bit more fats. So that would be a factor. Another thing is, just looking at your overall caloric intake. I know it says you feel like you're eating enough, but maybe you need to eat more at a meal, like have 3 solid bigger meals a day and then smaller snacks. If you're doing 2 small, like a bunch of 6 small snacks throughout the day, sometimes that can be just not enough for some women. So I would try maybe 3 larger meals and then 2 small snacks or something like that and try that. But it could just be a change in your metabolism as well. Like as long as it normalizes at some point, that's going to be okay. But see, a lot of times what happens is we're running off of stress hormones, and so we're not eating enough, where our appetite is suppressed. Once we start eating Fully Nourished style, all of a sudden our metabolism starts to speed up and our body's finally hungry for the first time in a long time. Our hunger hormones kind of normalize or shift, right, in the opposite direction, and we're hungry all the time. And then it kind of balances out to a point where it's like, oh, okay, like now I can trust my appetite signals. I'm not hungry every 2 hours. It just can take some time. Like think of it almost as if your body's been in a famine for 3 years and then now there's an abundance of food. Your body's going to be like, oh my gosh, like give it to me until it's satiated. So keeping that in mind and keeping survival in mind, I don't know what kind of past you're coming from, but those are things to kind of consider. And if things don't feel like they're working, then you can, of course, make some shifts. I'm not for sure if I have PCOS. Could you let me know what a general diet should look like? It's so much more than just about like what I should eat and what I shouldn't eat. I highly recommend checking out the book, How to Heal Your Metabolism by Kate Deering. If you like that book and you're wanting to learn more, that's where my program might come in handy for you that teaches you exactly what to eat and how to approach eating for hormones. And my course is called Fully Nourished. But that book, How to Heal Your Metabolism, is a great resource. Can you give an example on how you get enough vitamin C each day? Yeah, so what I do is I drink orange juice with breakfast. Sometimes I'll have another serving of it later on in the day. I usually sip on this throughout the day, so it's usually like half water or half coconut water and like half some type of juice. Guava juice is very high in vitamin C. The only brand I've been able to find is called Ceres. I'm not saying it right because it has an accent mark on it. But it's like a guava pear juice, and I found that at my local health food store, but you can also find it like World Market or online. It's usually used for like mixed drinks. But we want to like look towards fruits. Also, red bell pepper is a great source of vitamin C, as are cherries, but most fruits are going to be pretty high in vitamin C. Mango, pineapple, papaya, stuff like that. So I make sure I'm eating an abundance of fruits, which I think is quite the fertility food. It's very helpful at making more progesterone. And then if we find that we have like a hard time getting enough vitamin C, a whole foods vitamin C supplement like Camu Camu or Acerola Cherry. I actually have a story highlight dedicated to whole foods vitamin C on my Instagram. And so that is another way, you know, we can add like a teaspoon of Camu Camu to a smoothie or a shake, or even mix it in our juice or our water. And that really helps boost up our vitamin C levels if we're having a hard time getting it. But I usually say stay away from ascorbic acid or synthetic vitamin C because it can usually cause a lot of irritation for a lot of women. I like whole foods better. And I think the brands that I recommend in there are Pure Synergy brand and Health Force Superfoods. But like I said, an organic Camu Camu or Acerola cherry powder works really well as well. Cherries are very high. And yeah, we would want to be focusing on getting a couple thousand milligrams a day, mostly from food if possible. But if we need to, like I said, supplement with a whole foods vitamin C, it's just more about figuring out what we need. But I like a powder more than a capsule, unless the capsule is only filled with vitamin C and doesn't have any fillers. What do you recommend for day-night face moisturizer? I need to do an Instagram story that's like my whole face skincare routine, but I personally use squalene oil. I use the squalene oil by Cosma Beauty, but I know, which is Kossma, but what's it called? The Ordinary has a good squalene as well, but I like Cosma's because it's sugarcane squalene, whereas a lot of other brands are a different type of squalene. That's what I use. And then if I feel like I need a surge of moisture, I also use shea butter. And I always put a couple of drops of progesterone and vitamin E for like anti-aging and just skin turnover. And that really helps like plump up my skin and make it look really youthful. And that's kind of like my nightly serum. Sometimes I'll use like a lactic acid serum or a glycolic acid serum as well if I need a little exfoliation. Geesh, that was an amazing answer. I took tons of notes. Thank you. I know I didn't want the DIM supplement. I've been following all your suggestions and making progress slowly but surely. I'm sorry that it feels slow. Sometimes it's kind of frustrating because it's like, you know, we want things to be fixed quickly, and we're used to quick fix solutions. But always considering like what I've learned, and I've learned this from my long and extensive health journey that's lasted, you know, almost 8 years now, really, or longer, is that if it's so much better to take one step forward slowly than to take 5 steps forward and 4 steps back. Because oftentimes when we're taking that leap, then we're honestly sometimes causing a lot of damage that we now have to reverse that damage. And then we like take a leap and we do a quick fix here. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I just caused a ton of damage and now I got to recover and heal from that damage. So what I'm finding is a lot of women, including myself, I've done this in the past, is to get that quick fix solution. Let's just use intermittent fasting as an example. We want that weight loss quick. And so we start intermittent fasting. We're like, oh, it feels so good. Like, all, you know, like I'm losing all this weight. You know, you lose whatever, 8 pounds. And then all of a sudden your hair just starts falling out and you get like severe anxiety and you're just like, oh my gosh, I think I'm dying. And you're like, oh, that's what happens when I skip breakfast and drink coffee instead. Got it. And so now you have to recover from all the minerals that you lost, and you got to recover from all the problems that you caused and all the inflammation and estrogen that came from your tissues. And you're like, oh gosh, like, why did I do that? And it's like, I don't want women to go through that. And even though my solutions are maybe a little bit slower or a little bit more like, gosh, Jessica, stop telling me to eat every 3 hours. Like, shut up. It works. And it works, you know, and that's testimony from women who were in Fully Nourished since it launched. So it's almost coming up on a year now. July 15th will be a year. And the women that bought Fully Nourished and implemented it, their results to this day are just crazy, like crazy. One girl just posted how like half her hair is growing back. Of course, there's been like multiple pregnancies, women who have gotten their periods after not having periods for years and years, sometimes 10 years. So there's lots of, you know, there's tons of results, but it's just been consistency and time and just being really, you know, like it just takes consistency in doing the same things that I know can kind of seem like, oh gosh, is this enough? But it is, and it can be. Now, gut issues can play a role, which is why I'm actually probably going to create a gut program, because I think there are some women who a lot of their gut issues get tons better when they just stop eating so many irritating foods like nuts and seeds and cruciferous vegetables and tons of raw greens, like tons of salads and stuff like that. But there are those few women that just need the extra help. And I think I do think gut issues can play a bigger role because they do affect how we break down estrogen. Bacteria can make an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, which reactivates enzymes in the gut or estrogen in the gut, and then has it be reabsorbed and reutilized by the body. There are factors like endotoxin and bacteria overload coming from the gut can cause estrogen issues and hormone issues. And for some women, it's a metabolic issue, like their metabolism has just been so slow for so long that it's affected their gut. And so by healing their metabolism and getting their metabolism back into shape, their gut issues just go by the wayside, and they're like, I'm not bloated, I'm not constipated anymore. But some women, like, they need the extra help. And so I am like kind of thinking and brainstorming about a gut program, because I do think that would be a nice complement to Fully Nourished, just if people need the extra help. Hi, I'm working on my metabolism and finally eating enough of the right foods for healing. I know, I remember you, Sophia. I know that last week you said that your gut issues were getting a little worse. I'm still struggling with the scalp psoriasis. Will this maybe disappear as I heal more and more? It's possible. I know for me, I had like really bad seborrheic dermatitis, and even like I would say probably was psoriasis. I never like got the doctor to check it out. But I remember I used to get it really bad every winter. And so sunlight really did help me. I also would do like the apple cider vinegar rinses. And I did do a little bit more internal work. So I did do the biotics research, dysbiocide, and I think it's called ADP, which was just like a mixture of herbs, which now if I was going to go back, I would probably do just like oregano, raw carrot salad every day, a bamboo shoot salad every day, raw mushrooms every day, do horseradish every couple of days, and then possibly just limit my starches and do mostly fruit. That would kind of be like if I wanted to fast track my road to gut and like inflammation improving, I would have done that. Now hindsight's 2020. That's what I would have done. It took me a lot longer because I was experimenting with so many things and trying different things and figuring it out. But that's what I would do if I was to go back. So that's just kind of some things that I would think about. But yeah, I do think skin issues take the most, regardless of if it's like acne or eczema or dermatitis or anything like that. I used to have like horrible fungal dermatitis all around my skin. It looked like I had like a beard, like a red acne beard. And it kind of sounds funny, but it feels awful. And that was like the last thing for me to get better. For me, like my gut issues started to improve, my hormones started to improve, my energy started to improve. And I saw some shifts, but sometimes my skin issues would get worse before they get better, honestly. And it would just like kind of morph and change and shift. And now when I look back, I realize that, when your liver's burdened, your liver's your main detox organ, but you've got the kidneys, you've got the skin, and you've got the lungs. And so they're all working double time to get this junk out of your body because you're providing it what it needs. But if the liver's overloaded or the bowels are overloaded, so remember, if, things are moving through the digestive tract pretty sluggishly, the body's going to want to get junk out quick, and it's going to come out of the skin. And that is a factor. So those are things that I can, I like to remind people is like the skin sometimes is like the last thing to show improvements just because it's on the outside, and our inside skin is the priority. And that's what the body's working on first. I remember at some point you say to drink red raspberry leaf tea during the luteal phase. Is this correct? I like red raspberry leaf tea. And Fully Nourished, I have an herb infusion that includes oat straw, stinging nettle, and red raspberry leaf, because all those teas have some really great nutrients in them that are very, progesterone supportive. If we think of progesterone needing a lot of nutrients, because our corpus luteum, which is, so when we drop that egg, when we ovulate, we drop an egg, and that emptied egg sac becomes the corpus luteum, which is a gland that makes us progesterone. But remember, that actually came from the follicle in our ovary. So it took 100 days for that follicle dormant in our ovary to make it to where the egg would empty and drop. So if we think of it, it is a part of our ovary, and our ovary has a high need for specific nutrients like B vitamins and iodine and zinc and selenium and iron and vitamin D and vitamin A and vitamin C and vitamin E. We want that corpus luteum, that tissue that came from our ovary, that sac that came from our ovaries, to be as healthy and full of nutrients as possible. And if we know that it takes 100 days for that dormant ovary or dormant follicle in our ovary to make it to become that corpus luteum that's making us progesterone, we know that we have to consistently provide the body for 100 days all these nutrients. But that was a long tangent to say that red raspberry leaf does have some good nutrients in it. If it's organic and you remember that the way that plants are grown does affect the nutrients in those foods, because certain plants, different types of plants, are going to pull different things from the soil. This is partially what makes plants so medicinal, in the sense of they're pulling certain nutrients from the soils and then creating compounds with those nutrients. And so the soil does matter. And so this is why I really like Mountain Rose Herbs or Frontier Co-op. You really want to get your herbs sourced from someone who really cares. And Etsy is actually a great place for this as well. So, but yes, that was a long tangent. I'm sorry for the lecture. And yes, I like red raspberry leaf, but I don't think it necessarily needs to be drunk in the luteal phase. I think it's supportive during the luteal phase, but it's supportive all the time. Yay, can't wait for the new FN. Me neither, girl, because I am working my butt off. And when it's done, I'm going to be like, yes, just because it's it was, I needed to get out. Everyone was asking me for this information. And so I worked 17-hour days. I still remember that I was sometimes not sleeping, which is horrible looking back. I needed to get it done. And so now I look back and I'm saying, I've got to take better care of myself and pace myself for sure. I'm 51 years old, and recently my poor skin is pulling from the inside. Menopause, how can I help my skin inside out? 51 years old, and recently my poor skin is pulling from the inside. Menopause, how can I help my skin inside out? Would you say that it's thinning of the skin? Because I know that thinning of the skin is it's a symptom of menopause, but it's more of a symptom of high estrogen in relationship to progesterone. So it can totally affect elastin, and it can affect collagen production, and it can actually cause skin thinning. So if you're going through menopause, that's something that I would pay attention to. Are your progesterone levels really, really low? That is a factor. And so that would be something that you kind of would want to check out. Most women who go through menopause or are postmenopausal, they do have low progesterone issues. So that is something that I would consider. But yeah, thinning of the skin can also be caused by hypothyroidism. It could be caused by just a lack of nutrients, or especially fat soluble vitamins, if you don't eat dairy or you don't eat animal foods or anything like that. So that would be something that I would look into, anything that's going to be skin health related, fat soluble vitamins, minerals, hydration, and then hormones. Estrogen to progesterone balance is totally important, Cheryl. Food source potassium carbonate. Food source potassium carbonate. I'm trying to think of potassium carbonate. I don't think you need a food source of potassium carbonate. I don't think cream of tartar is potassium carbonate. Let me check though. I'm gonna Google that because a lot of people do fine with potassium carbonate, or I should say cream of tartar, but not everyone. And so when it comes to it's not. Potassium carbonate or cream of tartar is not potassium carbonate. It's potassium bitartrate, which I don't remember hearing that, but maybe I learned it a different way. But some people say that potassium or cream of tartar is hard on their stomach. And so sometimes potassium carbonate can be a better option. But the only potassium carbonate that I've heard of is just potassium carbonate USP powder, just getting pure potassium carbonate powder, which you do have to be careful with. You shouldn't just straight up take a bunch of that. I know that Jigsaw Formula's potassium or adrenal cocktail has a specific form of potassium in it. I think it is potassium carbonate that is easily absorbed, and a lot of people do pretty well on the Jigsaw Formula. Another really great source of potassium is coconut water powder. it is severely, severely high in potassium, and it's very absorbable. I've seen coconut water powder shoot people's potassium levels up faster than any type of potassium supplement could. So that's just another thing to kind of think about. What are the most telling symptoms of gut issues? I don't eat the irritating foods you say are factors that contribute, but I have bloating, look 6 months pregnant by the end of the day. I would say like that. Any type of digestive symptoms, so like constipation, diarrhea, fluctuating between the two. I'm trying to think of what else. You know, a lot of like mental type things. So feeling like we're on the mood roller coaster, depression, anxiety, feeling kind of like down, having carbohydrate intolerance or feeling like food just kind of sits in our gut. But, you know, if we're bloating excessively, that can definitely be a sign that we have bacterial overgrowth. But a great way to just test our transit time is to eat something very vibrantly colored. This would include like activated charcoal. You could do chlorophyll, or you could do something with beets in it, like the deep, deep red color of beets. And you want to see how long it takes for that stuff to move through your digestive tract. I personally like to see a transit time like around 24 hours or even a little less. If food's just sitting in your gut for 48 to 72 hours, can you imagine in a 98.6 degree body with a bunch of bacteria, a big bag of bacteria is doing to our food? Like, think of it that way. And so I think transit time is the number one thing we need to be concerned with when we are talking about gut issues. So that, you know, but it's mostly like mental, brain fog, anxiety, depression, mood imbalances. It can also be menstrual, like if we have severe cramping or severe inflammation, skin issues like eczema or psoriasis or rosacea or keratosis pilaris is another one, acne, and then obviously like gut issues like bloating, constipation, IBS, stuff like that. Can oregano be somewhat estrogenic? I've never heard that, but I'm sure it's possible. A lot of plants are somewhat estrogenic, but I don't know about oregano. And I would say that even if it was slightly estrogenic, its pros outweigh its cons. I made your red light from your DIY video. I've been losing my hair. I hang it over me and sit it under me. Is there a certain distance I should have it from me or to me? You know, I try to get it like a foot away, but for example, like it's better to just get it in than not at all. So this is probably like a foot and a half away. It's not as beneficial as like when I put it right by my scalp, but I would say like I try to do like a foot or so, but some people say that it's too much for them and they like a little bit of a farther distance. So I think it's really personally what works for you, works best for you. I'm so happy that I found you. Finally, so many pieces are making sense. I'm so glad because like I remember when I found this information, I was like, oh my gosh, like durr. I appreciate you and look forward to learning so much more. I'm so glad. Yay. When would hormone D be appropriate? I'm doing a lot of the things that needed, even sunlight, and my levels remain low, 23 in winter, 50-ish in summer. So, you know, remember hormone D, you know, there is definitely conflicting evidence. I personally think a level like from 20 to 50 is fine as long as we're getting enough sunlight. Remember, we need magnesium to make vitamin D. But vitamin D, if we're just getting one level tested, remember that's just the storage form of vitamin D, and our body's actually using up a lot of our vitamin D. So we have to remember, like, if nutrients are being used, that's okay. We don't necessarily want like a huge amount of storage of vitamin D. We want enough to get us through the winter time, but we don't want, we don't need like a ton in storage. We want to be using it. So it's just kind of like in the wintertime, it's normal for our levels to go down a little bit. Of course, if we're getting enough sun or we're doing even like a UVB lamp or something like that for just like 1 or 2 minutes to make vitamin D, it's so much better than supplementing it unless we know our mineral levels precisely. So, you know, if you know that you're not calcified, you know, your calcium levels aren't super high, you know, you're not magnesium deficient, you know, you're not potassium deficient, you know, you're not sodium deficient, you know, you're not boron deficient, you know, you're not lithium deficient. Okay, maybe a little hormone D is fine. But oftentimes those are the losses that we experience before we actually get to a vitamin D loss. So, or we're a vitamin D straight up deficiency. So I personally do not like vitamin D. Calcification is not pretty for our metabolism. It just isn't. It doesn't look good for thyroid health. It doesn't look good for, you know, our digestive health. Like getting calcified is not a good thing. I would say vitamin K is a much more important hormone or vitamin, fat soluble vitamin, to worry about than vitamin D, as long as our levels are good and we're not experiencing any symptoms. But for example, I kind of use my discretion. So I do have a little bottle of Carlson's 500 IU drops. And if I'm really feeling down in the dead of winter, what I do first is I go get a tanning bed. I go get a tanning bed pass, and I go sit in a tanning bed for like the least amount of time, their lowest level tanning bed, a couple times a week. And if that makes me feel better, then I don't take vitamin D. I'd rather just get some light. If that doesn't make me feel better, I'll take like a drop or two every, week or something like that. But, I personally am very careful with hormone D because I just think it can cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. And a lot of times it makes people feel better when they take it because it does increase PTH, parathyroid hormone, and that can increase ACTH, which is a stress hormone. So that can make you feel really good for a little while. My top half tans, my legs do not. That's really interesting. I've never heard of that before. A lot of times tanning and like melanin production and just being able to tan in the sun has a lot to do with polyunsaturated fat intake and copper. So I've heard a lot of people, as they take like grass-fed beef liver, they get their vitamin A levels up, their vitamin E levels up, they stop eating so many PUFAs, they start eating so much saturated fat, they begin to see a lot of changes in how their skin reacts to the sun. They no longer burn and they only tan. So that's just an interesting kind of observation. Would you write a book about PCOS metabolism in the future? Yeah, I mean, I would think about it. I think like, for me, being able to write mini articles and doing YouTube videos is going to be a way for me to get an expansive amount of information to you guys. I think like sometimes when you sit down to write a book, it's just like, what do I like put in there? What do I not? I would maybe self-publish it. I wouldn't like have a publisher go and be like, oh, you can put this in, you can't put this in. But yeah, I would think about it. I just find that maybe a book, especially with health information, it's very difficult because things are always changing. And so by the time a book's published, there might be stuff in there that is no longer applicable. And so it's kind of like that's why I've been so strategic. Like I have to be very strategic about how I get information to you guys. And that's why like the blog is now in the works, because I really want to start writing blog posts that you guys can read. And then I want to start doing YouTube videos that you guys can go watch on a specific topic. And then if something changes, I can redo the YouTube video and like update you on that topic. So that's, but yeah, I mean, of course I've considered books. If clearing up gut issues, how many days do you take activated charcoal for? I usually take it like once every couple of days, or if I feel like I need it. Like, of course, you've probably experienced endotoxin symptoms when you just feel ick. You just feel gross. You just feel you feel nauseated maybe. You feel bloated. Like you just feel like something's wrong in your digestive tract and like something's wrecked. And so I personally will take it when I feel wrecked. I know that's not like a health term, but you know what I mean. And then I'll take it like every couple of days. What we have to remember about activated charcoal is it absorbs everything, including minerals, including, including nutrients. And so it's best when taken far away from food, like 1 or 2 hours. So that's just something to kind of remember. But that's why I don't take activated charcoal every day. I don't want it absorbing to all of the food that I'm working so hard to eat. But it can be a very helpful tool to bind to endotoxin, and it just makes you feel better when you feel gross. I find potassium seems to increase my stomach acid production, feel burning. Yeah, this is why celery juice is such a popular trend for digestive health. Apparently I have a high need for it. I have gut bloating, but isn't that sodium even though low? Yeah, I mean, sodium can kill bacteria, which can be a factor in bloating when we intake sodium and potassium, or if we're doing it too fast. Like a lot of people are doing like a bunch of sea salt in their water and then they're just chugging that water and it's like, oh, I'm so bloated. And it's like, yeah, because it's causing your cells to like uptake a bunch of water and they almost become like bloated and just full of water. They're heavy, right? And it just feels like, ugh. And so it's best to get sea salt on your foods if you can. And not do too much like all at once. And potassium, again, like better to get it from food sources than to drink it all at once. But of course, that's not always possible. And so maybe spreading it out over the course of the day is better than doing it all at once. But yeah, sodium and potassium are going to definitely increase stomach acid. They do. These mineral salts are very, very important for stomach acid production. But yeah, we can definitely get bloating when we first implement minerals for sure, or just water retention as a whole. It's almost like the technical term for water retention is edema or becoming edemic. It's actually our cells uptaking water. And that can happen, for hormonal reasons. It can happen for mineral reasons. It can happen for a lot of reasons. How to get more copper in diet? I heard it's very important. My two favorites are going to be chlorophyll, like my detox lemonade. I talk about it in Fully Nourished and Mend Your Menstrual Cycle. And then my second favorite and the most important is grass-fed beef liver. So if we can't eat it, we should take it. I have KP, keratosis pilaris. I have my whole life. I'm also breaking out. It's around my mouth, but not cystic, and haven't broken out in years, like 10 years, and I have PCOS. Nothing in my environment and diet have changed. I don't know. But I have been under a lot of stress. Anything I can do to help my face. It's one of those things where if issues have been brewing over time, we kind of want to think of it as like, what's going to, the genetics are the trigger, or genetics are really the gun, and what's going to pull the trigger. And it can be one thing, and so stressor, like a big stressor, life event can be the trigger gets pulled, and now our health starts to go downhill very, very fast. So that is something that we should kind of remember. But some things that we can always do to help when we're under stress is make sure we're keeping our blood sugar balanced. So eating some protein and carb every couple of hours, like 3 to 4 hours, even if it's just like a little cheese and fruit or a little cottage cheese and fruit or something like that. Eating the raw carrot every day. If we can't swing the raw carrot salad, at least doing a raw carrot is so important. And then, just making sure we're getting enough sleep is very important, like getting to bed around 10 p.m., not midnight, not 1 a.m., but like 10 p.m. and getting enough sleep. Like those are little things that can cause a big change. Also, like drinking coconut water for potassium is helpful, maybe putting a pinch of sea salt in there, doing a glass of orange juice every day. If you can do fresh squeezed, even better. And doing magnesium. So magnesium bicarbonate, I have how to make it for very cheap using milk of magnesia on my Instagram, or we can do like magnesium chloride, which is just a magnesium oil spray on our body. So, those are some simple ways that I would throw out to reduce stress in any situation, but sometimes that's not going to be enough. And it's figuring out what's driving those issues. Like has the stressful situation just kind of made shit hit the fan, if you know what I mean. Would a transit time of starting at the 5 hours mark be considered too fast? Starting at the 5 hour mark. I would think yes. Like we have a lot of intestine, dozens and dozens of feet of intestine to get through. I think it's like, what is it like? You guys probably know better than I do. It's like 70. I don't know it off the top of my head. How long is the intestines? I know that the small intestines are like 48 feet. Maybe that's too long. Oh no, small intestine is 20 feet long. And the colon is 3 feet. So we got 23 feet going. So, or about 5 feet. So like 25-ish feet. So, we want food being extracted. We want it being efficiently assimilated and used. My question would be like, is it loose? Is it diarrhea? If that's the case, then it's probably not being absorbed. But if you're feeling like your digestion is optimal and everything's good, then that would, it's really in context. But would you mean like starting at the 5 hours mark just mean like it's 5 hours long? I don't necessarily know what that question means. How exactly do you take activated charcoal, and what brand do you recommend? I just usually look for like a coconut charcoal powder. I usually use like Solar Ray, which I usually get at my local health food store. Or I think Nutricost has a good one, which is online. And I just look for like a coconut charcoal powder. And usually I personally will start with a small amount, but I know I can tolerate like a tablespoon of activated charcoal, no problem. So I'll just, eyeball a spoonful, mix it in water. And you want to do a lot of water because it can be really constipating, and you just drink it on an empty stomach. But for someone that's just trying activated charcoal for the first time, I would start with a very low amount, like whatever the package recommends. And yeah, I just drink it with a lot of water. Any brand in particular of coconut water that doesn't have a strong coconut flavor. I know it has a lot of benefits, but I cannot stand the taste of coconut. You know, you're not alone. A lot of people hate coconut, and they actually learn to crave it because their body's getting nutrients from it. So I used to hate coconut water, and actually I love it now. Like my body like craves coconut water. And I've had so many clients say the same thing. And that goes the same for like diatomaceous earth, like so many things. They're like, I crave it. And I'm like, I know, it's because the body needs it. So when it comes to coconut water, a good way to transition is to mix it half and half. So coconut water and orange juice is my favorite little mix, but you can also buy like coconut water that has juices infused. So I'll get like coconut water with orange juice or mango juice, coconut water with pineapple juice. I don't know, there's other flavors, but I only do the pineapple and the mango. And that one is CO2 brand. And it just comes in a big, large can. Some people can get access to like fresh, young coconuts. That's always the best. And if you've never done like a fresh, young coconut, that tastes very different. It barely has a taste at all. And it's probably the best source of coconut water. A lot of like Asian grocery stores will carry young coconuts. So if you have one local to you, you might want to go over there and like stock up on coconuts. They have coconuts at my local health food store, but they're like $6 a pop. I know at my Asian grocery store, they're like $2. So drinking it fresh does taste different, but then the can ones are okay. And then Harmless Harvest is also another good one, which is really interesting because you can tell that it's fresh. Like it tastes very different. Would lamb liver be sufficient for copper? Yeah, I think lamb liver has some copper in it as well. I know beef liver is the highest, but all liver has some copper in it. I have acne, face and body, oily skin, dandruff, but light periods, still PCOS. I don't know. I couldn't tell you that. I mean, it sounds like PCOS-like symptoms, but I couldn't tell you if you have PCOS or not. That's your doctor's job. You guys know me. Like, I don't think diagnoses are really that helpful because, oh, yay, now I have it. Like, what do I do about it? Same thing. So it's kind of one of those things where, yeah, it can be nice to figure out the problem, but then also, like, moving forward, it's lowering stress, balancing estrogen to progesterone, supporting the thyroid, supporting the gut, supporting the liver. Like it's all the same for every single person. Everyone starts at various levels of stress. Some people have gotten themselves into a real tizzy, and some people are a little bit, they haven't gotten themselves so far. And so when we look around and we say like, oh, well, why is this person progressing faster? Well, their body might not have been in as bad a place as yours is, or vice versa. And so it's just that's important to remember. I personally think that PCOS is just an expression after, years and years and years of stress and years and years and years of not ovulating, not having enough progesterone and being exposed to estrogen and not having good thyroid function. And I just think that eventually it turns into a full-on metabolic reproductive issue. What do you think about licorice and white peony for hormones? I think, doesn't Dr. Lara Bryden mention this in her book? I think that sounds familiar. I personally don't have a lot of experience with licorice and white peony. Licorice root, I have, I learned about it, using it in school for adrenal fatigue. It is an adaptogen that speeds up your adrenal function. I personally don't like using something that's going to speed up my adrenal function until I know that I've got my magnesium, sodium, and potassium levels balanced. So that's my experience with licorice. And it can raise blood pressure as well. Not a huge fan, but I'm not very familiar with white peony. I've never used it, nor have I used it with clients. So I don't know much about it at all. I love harmless coconut water. Me too. It's just so refreshing, and it's pink, it's just cute, Thoughts on adrenal glandulars for low cortisol? I've seen them cause way more problems than they solve because they're not asking the question, why is my adrenal function low? The body has compensated. The body has lowered adrenal output because it can't. It either can't, it doesn't have the nutrients, or it doesn't want to because it doesn't want the body breaking down its tissues any more than it has to. And so, I've experienced this very close and personal with one of my clients that I've worked with for a really long time. And when she first came to me, her Dutch test, all her hormones were just straight up low, estrogen low, progesterone low, testosterone low, cortisol flatline. She was just in a horrible fatigued state. And nothing that she did with any other practitioners would work. She tried all types of glandulars, all types of herbs, Vitex, adrenal glandulars. Like, she tried it all, and nothing budged her cortisol. It just made her worse. Progesterone made her worse. Thyroid medication made her worse. Everything made her worse. The only thing that fixed her issue was gaining 30 pounds, eating an abundance of carbohydrates, getting her calories up to 2,300 calories a day, eating plenty of carbs, plenty of protein, and eating every 3 hours. And that is what fixed her issue. And balancing her minerals, getting her potassium levels up, sodium levels up, magnesium levels up, like working on her minerals. And she literally, finally, her cortisol, her rhythms, perfection. Her estrogen was flooding out of her body for a couple of months. It was rough. Her acne got worse and stuff like that. Her progesterone levels are back to optimal, normal. She's ovulating. Her testosterone levels are moving on up. So the only thing that worked was her just being very consistent and meticulous about eating every 3 hours, eating 2,300 calories a day, gaining 30 pounds, which was hard for her, and being meticulous about her minerals. Like, she did what I told her to do, and she did it precisely, and it has paid off for her. Yeah, she's frustrated about her weight gain, but she is very happy about her adrenal output is much better. And once her adrenals started functioning, she started pumping out stress hormones. So, her body now started responding to the inflammation that's in her gut, and her body finally started responding appropriately to what her body's been going through. So that's just a long story of saying that it takes some time and takes some consistency. You said on a previous live about the best kind of cottage cheese, but I can't remember what you said. Was it a specific percentage of milk fat? Not necessarily. I try to look for the lowest amount of additives. So Daisy cottage cheese is the one that I found that is pretty much available in most stores. And some people are like, oh my God, it's not organic. And I'm like, well, it's accessible. And some people just don't want to go to their health food store 40 miles down the road and get some cottage cheese. So I think Daisy is a good option, but the full fat one is the only one that doesn't have additives. So if you're looking for a low fat version, unfortunately that one has I think carrageenan in it. But the Kelowna one that I maybe shared on my Instagram is another one that I found that has no additives. A lot of organic cottage cheese brands have all types of nasties in them, like arabic gum, locust bean gum, carrageenan, like all those weird gums. I personally would prefer to have one that has, nothing in it. And so Kelowna is the only one I found, Kalona. They are a really interesting company because they support a lot of Amish dairy farmers who farm very excellently, mind you. And so I really like supporting them when I can get my hands on their products because I know that their sourcing is really good. Didn't know that prenatals could be that harmful for you. Best source is of folate. I try to eat nutritional yeast every other day. If I was worried about folate, I would take some methylfolate or something like that over taking just a variety of a prenatal. But yeah, folate, grass-fed beef liver, any type of liver is a great source of folate. Really well-cooked leafy greens or a leafy greens broth, if you make a broth or you make bone broth and you throw it in, or brewer's yeast or nutritional yeast are good sources of B vitamins. Bee pollen, if you can tolerate it, of course, don't just go eat a tablespoon of bee pollen unless you know that it's not a problem for you and you're not allergic. But bee pollen is a great source of B vitamins, and royal jelly as well. What is a good way to start eating dairy again? I've drank cashew milk and almond milk and all caused allergy issues. Yeah, I would say just starting with a tablespoon a day of a high quality milk is usually the easiest and best option, and just doing it consistently every 2 weeks or for 2 weeks. So, if you're going to choose drinking it with lunch, just drink a sip with lunch for 2 weeks until you want to try maybe 2 tablespoons or 2 sips. And you work up to half a cup and being able to tolerate half a cup. And then once you can tolerate half a cup, then you can do a full cup. And then you would maybe want to try some other ones see how you do with cottage cheese, ricotta cheese, maybe Parmesan cheese, stuff like that. Yogurt tends to be the hardest on people because it's so high in lactic acid. And if you're kind of intolerant to dairy, it can be a problem. But I would just start, I did start with 1 tablespoon a day of raw milk personally. Also, how does iron manifest itself? What symptoms? A wide variety. So lipofuscin is kind of the technical term of polyunsaturated fats and iron meshing together and causing all types of problems, that's going to show up in physically and manifest in an age spot, or, you know, getting like lots of freckling and moles and things like that. Melasma is just a fancy word for age spots as well. And it's driven by estrogen, sorry. But remember, the birth control pill is very high in iron. Sometimes some of them have like 75 milligrams a pop. So this is why a lot of women get melasma when they're on birth control. But lipofuscin or iron toxicity can show up in all types of ways. So inflammation, autoimmunity, we've got thyroid issues, you know, it suppresses the thyroid. It can be early menopause. It can be lack of being able to make hormones like progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, gut issues specifically. Gut iron's very damaging to the digestive tract. It causes like tiny little scars and feeds bacteria, pathogenic overgrowth, so fungal overgrowth, not being able to get a control on your bacterial issues, gaining weight when you eat carbohydrates, obesity, really just like any type of metabolic condition is also can be an issue. Carbohydrate intolerance, like I said, glucose intolerance, inflammatory issues, pretty much almost all issues that we see in our society can be boiled down to iron issues. What are thoughts on rheumatoid arthritis and metabolism and hormones? I think rheumatoid arthritis has a big iron component. I also think it has a lot of estrogen involved. It's like an estrogen to progesterone issue. You know, because it's an inflammatory condition, especially of the joints, like we want to look at stress, we want to look at estrogen to progesterone, we want to look at just all factors that could drive inflammation. Personally, like I'm not a doctor, so I don't treat a specific condition. I'm looking at the body as a whole and how maybe there are certain factors underlying, like the body's imbalanced as a whole and it's driving an inflammatory issue. But I would always, when it comes to autoimmunity, as I was diagnosed with 3, mind you, post-birth control, including lupus, is I would always look to estrogen. I would always look to progesterone. I would always look to gut and liver. And then I would always look to thyroid and like adrenals. So how's my thyroid functioning? Because that's going to affect my immune system. And then minerals, of course, are the little spark plugs that make cells work. And so if our cells aren't functioning, our immune system's not functioning. I do think that metabolism and hormones has a role to play in all issues. And it's still important for us to be eating for our metabolic function and our cell function. I drink whole milk in my coffee every day. Not raw, unfortunately, it's hard to get in my area. Yeah, as it is in most. I just happen to live in a state where I can get it. And some random cheese throughout the week and some cottage cheese. So I don't eat a ton of dairy, but would that just be a contributory to my bloating? Just a thought. It could be. I don't know. I mean, you could experiment with it. You guys know I'm pretty pro dairy, and if we're reacting to dairy, it's a whole nother issue that's driving that. But I mean, it could be a factor for a lot of people, but nothing a raw carrot salad can't help. What collagen brand do you recommend? Is Vital Proteins brand okay? Yeah, I usually recommend like Vital Proteins or Great Lakes. Those are kind of my 2 favorite brands that I know of. On the topic of too much iron, if we're experiencing a lot of what you mentioned, how do you recommend detoxing iron? So the best way to increase our iron recycling system is to make sure we're having our period monthly, and then we can also give blood. That's another great way to speed up that process. Vitamin E can be very helpful, as is vitamin C. So whole foods vitamin C helps us utilize iron. Also keeping in mind magnesium and copper. So magnesium is such an important mineral for so many things, but including utilization of iron, and then copper. So as I mentioned earlier, copper is found in like grass-fed beef liver and chlorophyll. Those are going to be like our highest sources of copper, but also any naturally vitamin C rich foods are going to have copper. So like I said, like orange juice, so powerfully helpful with copper, which is going to, of course, help iron. Supplementing whole foods vitamin C, like camu berry or acerola cherry, can be very helpful with iron issues because it contains copper. So that's really like everything we talked about actually today really does kind of flow well into iron issues. So vitamin C, copper, magnesium, and, giving blood, make sure we're menstruating, making sure we're making enough progesterone, all that good stuff. How many grams of dietary fat a day is too high? I cannot too much impair energy. I know PUFAs are not good. You know, I say that we need to eat enough fats to stay satiated, and we need to eat enough fats to not be craving fatty foods. Like a lot of women, if you're under eating fats, you're going to find yourself craving things like ice cream and whipped cream and cheese and, you know, butter and things like that, like rich foods. If you're craving foods like that, that shows you need to eat more foods like that. If we're overeating fats, we're going to probably gain weight. Because remember, guys, saturated fats can be made in the digestive tract. A healthy digestive tract can make us saturated fats from carbohydrates. Sugar can be made into saturated fatty acids. And so this is why I'm always saying, like, getting our body balanced as a whole will help it function better as a whole. And we won't need to eat so many dietary fats as well, like saturated fats. So I don't think, like, you know, I think we should eat enough fats to feel satiated and feel good and not have any fat cravings, like for fatty foods, but we shouldn't overdo it on the fats. Like, you know, we're not on a keto diet. We're not looking to add fat to a meal. Like, we're not looking to drink heavy whipping cream down the chute. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, you know, cook in a dab of butter, get your fat mostly from whole foods. So instead of like cooking in a high amount of fat, get fat from like your grass-fed beef or whatever. So not looking to add excess amounts. And usually that's going to look around like 25% of our calories coming from fat. So for like an 1800 calorie diet, I think it's like around 58 grams, but I want to just show you. So I'll just show you how to calculate. So let's say you're eating 1800 calories a day. You're going to take 1800, and then you're going to times it by 0.25 or 25%. That's going to come out to 450 calories. Then if you know that there's 9 calories in a gram of fat, you're going to divide 450 by 9. And that gives you 50 grams of fat. And so I know that 25% of an 1800 calorie diet is 50 grams of fat because there's 9 calories in a gram of fat. So I would say 25% is a really good goal. And if we're eating 2200, that's going to look a little higher. So I think 25% is a good moderate goal. And then, like I said, you know, if you're craving fatty foods and like you're breastfeeding and your milk production is going down, like eat more fat, you know, like it's not a rule. It's just kind of a good place to kind of sit at. When will you be taking new clients? I will be taking new clients kind of coming August. So June is, I'm slammed for June. July is kind of like, I'm just working with my clients and then that I currently have. And then come August, I'll be taking new clients. So keep an eye out for that. Should we be drinking pasteurized or unpasteurized organic OJ? I think that's what you're comfortable with. Personally, like I drink fresh when I can. So that's of course unpasteurized, but when I get like Uncle Matt's brand or Trader Joe's brand, I often get the pasteurized. But the interesting thing about the Trader Joe's organic, at least, is it like always goes bad. I don't know about you guys, but like if it sits in my fridge for more than 4 days, and you know, I'll be honest, I'll do a little admission here, is I'll sometimes drink straight out of the carton or the plastic container. But if I don't drink it fast enough, it always becomes fermented. I'm just like, I don't want a science experiment. I just want orange juice, you know? But it doesn't happen for whatever reason. So there's something with the Trader Joe's brand that just weirds me out. And weirdly, it's like the pasteurized version. So I don't know. Like, it's just really odd. Okay, yes. Okay, Victoria says it's happening to her too. I feel the same way. Like my produce kind of goes badly. So it makes me wonder, are they using some whack oranges? Are they using some whack produce? Like, is it like the stuff that's on the brink? Just a question, because I want to know why it's so cheap. Like, that's my question for them. But yeah, I don't really think it matters between pasteurized and unpasteurized. Remember, like fresh juices have the enzymes in them which help like break down inflammation and are very, very, you know, good for the cells, like very good for the digestive tract. They help us digest foods better. So fresh is always best. I think like juicing foods, especially like juicing fruits like cucumbers and oranges and grapefruit and all type, you know, melons and things like that can be such amazing complements to our foods. I don't think we need to be juice fasting to get the amazing benefits of like juicing fresh foods. But if that's something that you maybe can't afford, or you're just not into it right now, or it doesn't, you know, your schedule just doesn't jive with that, that's okay. Like, a pasteurized juice is fine, you know, because the fructose still matters. The sucrose and the sugars still matter. Me too. I stopped buying certain things because they go bad so quickly, sometimes 2 to 3 days. Yes. Okay. Thank you. I'm not going crazy. I'm not going crazy. Okay. So we've been here for 1 hour and 40, which is awesome. I'm going to do like a last call for questions, just so if you guys have something brewing in your brain, just, you know, ask me. Perfect. We have more coming in. And then I really appreciate like you guys showing up and just hanging out with me on a Wednesday. I know it's late for some of you. I've gotten a period 3 months in a row for the first time in my life, have PCOS, and used to get them 3 times a year. That's amazing. Afraid I'm going to jinx it, but it's because I started eating sugar and carbs. Yeah, most women do see it. Like, and even if you don't get it, like it becomes a little irregular again, don't lose hope. Like, to get your period back and then to have it consecutively 3 months in a row, that's pretty great. Like, that's pretty awesome. Most women sometimes get their periods back and then it doesn't come for a while, and then it gets more and more regular. So that's something to celebrate. Like, good job. That shows that your hard work has paid off. Dairy in Canada is really frustrating. Raw is illegal. I can only find grass-fed, but it's pasteurized, and I find it makes my stomach hurt still. Do you think it's even worth it if it's not raw? I think it's just dependent on you. If you're just like, it makes your stomach hurt, I would try maybe if you can get like goats or sheep's milk dairy. It might be easier because remember, there's A2 milk, which is like they took like a while back, they took cows and they kind of like mutated them so that they would produce more milk. But what happened when they mutated them is that they started to create something called A1 casein, and it started being like, some people react poorly to it. So there's just more casein to break down. So cows can make both A1 milk and A2 milk. And so, but goats and sheep only make A2 milk. And so sometimes A2 milk can be easier to break down for some people. So trying goats or sheep's milk can sometimes help us get to a point where we can tolerate cow's milk again. So just a factor. Thank you, Jess. I'll probably have more questions next week. That's fine. If you guys want to like write them down in your notes app when you remember them and ask them here, that's so great. And I'm happy to answer them. What are some good snacks to eat during the day? Ooh, you know, I like to do at least one smoothie for a snack that has like frozen fruit, milk, and a little OJ, and some collagen and casein protein. That's like one of my favorite little smoothies to do, and I've been really into frozen cherries lately, and they're really rich in vitamin C. Costco kind of goes back and forth with the frozen fruit they have, so, you know, whenever they have frozen cherries, I'm in love, but they do like frozen blueberries, frozen mixed berries. They have like a tropical blend that has like pineapple, peaches, mango, papaya. So I like to like mix up the frozen fruit, but I'm usually doing a drink that has frozen fruit in it. Once a day for a snack, I'll do like cheese and fruit a lot, or I'll do like Greek yogurt and honey a lot. Ricotta cheese and fruit. I've been doing a lot of like halloumi, which is a Greek like cheese that you can sear on both sides. It tastes really awesome with strawberries. Like, I've been doing strawberries with a little brown sugar on top and some like hard-boiled eggs. Like, that's been a good snack of mine. If I'm in like a really big hurry, I'll do like an Epic bar and like a fruit leather. Like, you know what I mean? Like fruit leathers. They're usually made for kids, but you know, we're all kids at heart, so it works out. And you can get a big pack of those if you have a Costco near you or you have a Costco membership. Like, that's a great way to save money because they have like lots of different little fruit things. I'm gonna do like a Costco haul for you guys because just there's a lot of stuff at Costco that works really well. Just because I'm eating tons of fruit, so it's kind of nice to buy it in bulk. But yeah. But yeah, those are some snacks that I can think of. Sometimes I'll just do like coffee with some milk and some collagen and like some type of dessert, like B vitamin cookies or fudge or something like that. What am I drinking? This is half coconut water, and it's coconut mango water. So it's like the coconut water with mango juice I was talking about, a bunch of crushed ice at the top, and then a little bit of OJ because I only had a little bit left. So I'm just drinking on a little juice. And I had dinner before, so I had like some leftover au gratin potatoes that had some chicken in them and some like leeks and stuff like that with some goat cheese and stuff. I wanted to make sure I had some type of fructose after my starchy meal. Tips to shorten your cycle. Mine are still 37 days or so. Usually it's because we're ovulating later and our follicular phase is long. So the follicular phase, I have such a hard time saying that, is going to be lengthy due to stress oftentimes. So we're either not sleeping well, we're not eating enough, we're over exercising. CrossFitters often have this issue. Our body's in like a fight or flight. And so we have to kind of determine what are our stressors, what's causing us to ovulate late and push our luteal phase longer. And do you know if you're ovulating or not? That would be another question. If you're not ovulating, that would be something that you would want to point to. Jessica, today I have extreme pain on my period, was shaking, almost vomited, and extremely painful breast for 2 weeks before. How to mitigate this? Is this a mineral deficiency? You would probably do really well with my course called Mend Your Menstrual Cycle. Anytime that we have severe issues during our luteal phase, which is that second half of the cycle, it's oftentimes a sign that we're having a hard time detoxifying estrogen, or we're estrogen dominant, or we have a progesterone deficiency, or all three. And so there are so many different things that can help you with that. And Mend Your Menstrual Cycle talks about like the 11 tips. So I go through like how to work on estrogen detoxification, progesterone deficiency. I give you like a little elixir to drink. That's a mineral rich elixir. And so I like that. I made that course specifically for women who are maybe not ready for Fully Nourished, but wanted like some quick tips to start making a difference. And that's available at the link in my bio. But yeah, it has like grass-fed beef liver in there. I talk about eating oysters. I talk about your, mineral rich progesterone elixir that has some guava juice, some OJ, some coconut water, stuff like that. And I need to call the company because I recommended this certain powder called hydration powder, and they're sold out of it now. So I think they like didn't realize I was recommending it. So I'm going to call them and say like, hey, just FYI, I put your powder in my course, and like everyone bought it all up. So I'm going to see what we can do about making sure there's more, but any coconut water powder will suffice. Is there any vitamin mineral deficiency linked to cracking joints? My knees and elbows continuously crack every time I bend them. It can be calcium. Like some people do have that issue, or it can be other issues like their ligaments are being broken down from stress. So remember, like if we're under a lot of stress, we're not eating enough, we're not eating frequently enough, we're not eating enough carbs, our body's breaking its own tissues down, sending them to the liver to be turned into sugar to keep blood sugar stable and feed our cells. And so, that's going to include things like tendons and ligaments and stuff like that. Yes, Costco haul. Yes, thank you. Yay. I know. I wanted to wait until we don't have to wear masks anymore, but we might just have to. It's just like hard to talk through a mask. It just like the video's gonna be like, what did she say? So yeah, that was kind of what I'm waiting for. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff at Costco that's cool. There's like these Parmesan cheese wraps that I found. They're like tortillas made of specifically Parmesan cheese. I'm obsessed with them. So I got to take a picture of those and show them to you guys. But I thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your guys' time. It's been so amazing again on Wednesday nights, and I'll of course be live next Wednesday. And yeah, I'll catch you around on Instagram this week.